ladies and gentlemen, it's time to arise. Tonight we're talking about Sepultura's 1991 album, Arise. As always, I'm David Pizza, here with you in front of this brick wall. With me, also as always, are Gabe, Tracy, and Ben, doing this thing we call Thunderdome Metal Reviews. How are you gentlemen this fine evening? Tracy, you look skeptical.
I'm trying to think of a way to say we are rising to the top, but
I think you just did it. I think you just achieved that. So,
well, I am Orgasmatron to be talking about this album. So.
Hell yeah, fucking Motorhead, indeed.
I am Under Siege.
Exactly.
It sounds like a desperate cry for help.
I'm just so tired. I just feel like a dead embryonic cell at this point. So,
and that's the episode. We got over.
And that's it. That's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
See you next
Banner
time.
falling behind us.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, as David said, we're doing Sepultura of Rise. It was released on March 25th of 1991. This is their fourth studio album. It was released on Roadrunner and recorded in Morrisound Studios. The producers were Sepultura and Scott Burns. It has a runtime of 42 minutes and 26 seconds. You have Max Cavalera on lead guitars and rhythm guitar, Igor Cavalera on drums and percussion, Paulo Jr. on bass and backing vocals, and Andreas Kisser on lead guitar and backing vocals. So, David, why did you choose this early rendition of Sepultura for us?
Because it's fucking thrash, man. Because we had, we've done Roots and Chaos ID, which I admit are better albums than this. But after those, this is my third favorite Sepultura album. It was the first one I bought, so I have a sort of good place in my heart for it. It's a Scott Burns, Morrisound Studios type situation, so extremely 1991. And I just dig it because one, it's classic thrash, and two, I feel like, it's very much in the vein of Beneath the Remains, one that came before it. But there is a bit of a turn to a little bit of industrial, see Nail Bomb, and some of the groove, especially when we talk about tracks. I'll mention a couple of these where they start playing with some of the stuff you'll see more of in KSAD and even more of in Roots, and then they break the experiment like assholes. But
there's also a little bit of death metal on this too.
Hell yeah, it does, as it should. Just look at it. I agree with all that. I know, as Gabe said as we were editing last episode, I think I might know why you picked this. This checks a lot of boxes for me, man. So
go ahead.
This is I was an early adopter of this as well. I don't think this was not the first Sepultura album I got. I'm pretty sure that was Chaos AD, but I was so impressed by that I started searching out their other things. This is around this time is when I started hearing rumblings about Sepultura because they were starting to get some press in the magazines. You were starting to see them listed on tours, which I never got to go to in 91, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Or also seeing like bands starting to wear their shirts on stage, and if it was a band you liked, that was a way to be introduced to new music. So that was actually a pretty powerful thing. We've talked before about like seeing White Zombie shirts and Pantera videos and being like, oh, I should check them out. This was a similar thing. So yeah, this is pretty badass, although a little basic thrash, but with elements of death, and you can see the seeds of what they're going to become in future albums for sure.
Yeah, you can see what they become. Not to put it harshly, but I'm glad that they made the turn that they did in Chaos, because hearing this album, if this is what if they would have continued on this thrash track, it might have improved, it might have made it stand out, but also it kind of hits into very almost basic thrash if you think about it. Like, it sounds very similar to other thrash bands. Now that's not a knock, but it's not stand out as Chaos RD or how Roots was when you hear them.
I don't know if you say that if you heard it at the time. It's so hard to know because you know what they turn into.
Yes.
And I would say in their defense, this is in a weird spot between like Seasons and Rust in Peace, but we haven't had the turn to like Black Album hasn't happened, Countdown hasn't happened, so that pop turn has not occurred yet, or whatever, that chasing the glory thing. So yeah, maybe it's basic
Well,
thrash, but they're so. But I don't know. I think that they can play the shit out of their instruments, and I fucking love Max.
Black
Yeah, it's
Album comes
91,
out.
Tracy.
Yeah, Black Album comes out the same year as this, though.
Yes, but that's the same year as this is not before this, Tracy.
Yeah, it's like 3 months later.
That is,
and,
yes,
and
that,
also
that
would
is
not be
that is-
influencing what they were doing here.
Yeah.
that is literally what I'm saying, Tracy. It's
Yeah.
time. They did not have time travel.
That we know of.
For sure.
Although with this album
Indeed.
cover, who knows? That could be the time machine. What I will say, and then I'll get out of the way for Gabe, is that yes, knowing what they become, and like I said, you can see the seeds here, but listening to this in real time, where I thought they would be going would be more of a Slayer route, because there is some like prime Slayer worship going on here, and I'm here for that, so I do not mind at all.
Yeah, I guess I'm what you might call a late adopter. I started listening to Sepultura's earliest records a couple of years ago, and so I was a fan of the first 3 records. Hadn't heard this one yet, but this one didn't disappoint. And I think it is an interesting transition kind of record, in the sense that the groove is just kind of breaking out, and the groove moments on the record provide a really much needed variety, because as Tracy says, it kind of threatens to go into kind of a samey thrash territory. It's not doing all that much that's interesting or new there. But where it steps out of the box and experiments, that's where it gets really exciting. And I think that's what makes this album probably unique among other records of that time. Aside from the fact that it's sort of like, you know, testing the groove a little bit, and has some maybe more experimental and kind of psychedelic moments to it as well. And that said, like, I am not as acquainted with their later albums, so what drew me to Sepultura actually was sort of the death and thrash that's going on at the very, very beginning. And in general, as you know, some people might know, I'm not totally drawn to groove all the time. It's not the first thing that I go for, but I think it's important here.
I agree with that. It's one of the things I like most about them. I want to give a shout out to, I think the mix on this album is pretty good. And Scott Burns often nails it. I mean, one of the things I like is you really can hear the bass playing, which I love thrash, y'all, but there's some Metallica and especially some Slayer where it's very questionable whether it's even there. And it's, you know, it and the drum are essentially following each other, but you can really hear it. And there's even a couple of bass solos on here, little flourishes you get to hear. I think Max's voice is, I mean, he's a baby here, but it's pretty good, and he's singing pretty clearly. And I think he grows into, you know, the thing he does now is pretty terrifying, but it's sort of interesting to hear him with less mileage on him. This is much earlier. You know, and Andreas Kisser, he wrote a lot of this music. Yeah, was classically trained in terms of Spanish guitar, and you hear a ton of that on the albums after that. There's just a little bit here, but not much. So I do think there's some potential that we know is there that they hadn't quite used. But you know, they've come a long way since Schizophrenia, which is not a bad album. It's something I'm going to listen to that if you haven't. It sounds like Gabe has. I like Schizophrenia.
I really like that record. It's really, really good.
It's
so
fun.
do
It's
listen.
very cool. Yeah, so we can add some of the even earlier stuff. I've been trying to work backward through their catalog, but this is so, and you know, I got into metal in like 89 or whatever, 89, 90, 91. This is exactly in that period. And that they felt like a Slayer tribute band with some extra groove, you know, because I was also listening to Pantera with like, that's Yes Please, right? Like that's, you know, I'm a sucker for this album. What can I say?
I want to add to a couple of the points that you made. One, about the production. We've heard other albums they recorded in more sound studios around this time. The production on this is way better than on those. And I don't know like the sequence of the recordings to know if it was just a a thing of like when they first started the studio, they just didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and they got better as it went along, or if there was some other mix in here that like maybe the dudes in Sepultura, since there was their fourth album, knew what the fuck they were doing and helped out. Also on the bass player part, yes, this has for thrash, I would say that this has David Ellefson levels of bass playing, or maybe not quite that well, but you can hear it in the mix much better than you can anything, especially Metallica after Cliff dies. So
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with you guys because this has, they probably had half the budget that probably Peace Out, but Who's Buying does. But I think it has comparable production values, if not better.
Yeah, I guess Gone Birds had a good day. I think their label must have been supporting them at this point because part of it, of course, is studio time, which you can afford to do. But they just, and they do keep some of this simple in some ways. There's not too many layers compared to some of what they're doing later. But yeah, this album sounds great for how old it is and just a lot of fun.
I want to say there's probably that Max, with his, I guess, touches in songwriting, he has a way of making things simplistic yet super catchy when he does it as well. So they really kind of adds, I guess you would say, like it adds some consistency and meat to the bones and like the songwriting.
And this album has a lot of stuff I love and things like Lamb of God, like the guitars that are slightly dueling with each other, and the drum work is awesome. I don't know, like there's a lot of stuff grows out of this, I feel like. And I do, if they had just gone and done more thrash, I still would have liked them, but the thing they do after this is monstrously awesome. So, but there's elements to it here, and obviously that's with hindsight. But even at the time, I thought this was cool as shit. I mean, it was different enough from like Overkill, or because I listened to a lot of thrash. I was listening to a lot of thrash, not just Slayer, and this stood out to me.
We ready for tracks?
If you want.
Anybody else got anything to add? All right,
I am ready.
Let's go into tracks. Who wants to start us off?
I can go first.
Yeah, please, Gabe.
So I think Arise is a pretty good opener, and Dead Embryonic Cells is also a good follow-up. Where the album really picks up steam is Desperate Cry, which I liked a lot, and Murder I also thought was fantastic. Subtraction is good. I liked most of these songs, but I think Altered State really stands out because of the sort of psychedelic interlude / solo right there. There's flute at the beginning of it. It just comes out of nowhere. It's really kind of odd and in a cool way. And I think Infected Voice is a really good closer too.
I'm kind of opposite of Gabe there. I think this album is bookended really well, but I think kind of dips between Murder and Altered State. I think it opens up real well with Rise. I love Dead Embryonic Cells and Desperate Cry. I think kind of dips until Under Siege and Meaningless Movements, and it ends well.
So I also think Arise is a really great song. I think Dead Embryonic Cells is a fucking masterpiece. It is still one of my favorite Sepultura tracks. The rest of the album is also pretty good, but I think that is really the highlights. A track that is not listed on here that was on the version that I listened to, and actually the version that I own, is the cover of Orgasmatron. And
Totally.
that is fucking amazing. It's
so good.
Actually more punk than Motorhead's version, which is kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, no, this is it's front loaded, but it is still it's good all the way through.
Yeah, the version I have has Orgasmatron on. I'd say all. So drink. And Arise is a great opener. Dead Embryonic Cells is one of the best metal songs, one of the best thrash songs ever written in the history of thrash songs. Desperate Cries, I really think that's where you start seeing this groove, this sort of groove element. There's a bit of a Murder too. Altered State, I think, is one of the tracks that most points to some of the stuff they're going to start playing with in the next couple albums. Under Siege is badass. Meaningless Movements and Effective Voice drop off a little bit, but then for me at least, the Orgasmatron cover is so fucking good. So, 8 of the 10 of these are on the giant metal playlist I have that I'm listening to right now. So pretty much all of them. It's good shit. It's good for you.
So, David, what would you grade it?
You know what I'm going to say. Probably. It is not. It's my third favorite Sepultura album. It's not quite as good as Roots and Chaos AD, but it's still fucking A. It's a legend. This album is legend. I'm even going to give it a 96. I'm going to kick it up just to the highest A. I love it because I think I gave the other 2 A pluses probably because I'm an asshole. So 96.
I'm going to come in a smidge lower than that. I would give this the highest B plus. I think this is an excellent album. There's a lot of good stuff on here, but some of it's not quite ready for prime time quite yet. And maybe that's penalizing a little bit because of how transcendent the next couple of albums they have are. But I do think that this is, I mean, if you listen to our last review, which if you haven't, you should go back and do that, slackers. I think that this album, which that was Nevermore's Dreaming Neon Black. I think that this album is a better album than that, but it's because it hits all of my boxes in a similar way that it does with David. And but I think that they are both similarly situated into metal canon and are albums that you should hear, but are not quite in the echelon of the greatest albums of all time.
I'm going to give this go a step lower than Ben. I'm going to give it a B. It's a solid album, a good album, but I think it's just good. I don't think it's nothing to make it particularly stand out, especially comparing to what they release later.
I'm gonna find myself right between David and Ben. This is an A minus. It's not as good as Schizophrenia, for instance, and I'm not sure I'm as attached to some of the more groove heavy Sepultura albums as maybe David is. So I don't think this is the best they can do. And maybe they've got better stuff later on, but they've definitely got at least one record that's better than this one earlier.
As I said, it's my third favorite Sepultura album. I think Tracy's penalizing them for what they become. It's teleological, but what are you going to do?
Well, David, your third Sepultura album has aggregate grade of 91.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I could see that. I'm obviously attached to it emotionally. Yeah. Would I fucking buy it? Of course. I bought it the first time and I'd buy it again. And no one could stop me. Yeah, I'd buy this album. Easy. Duh.
I don't think I would.
You're a coward.
I've bought this album twice because I bought it when I had my CD collection that I sold in the early 2000s to buy a car. And I currently own a copy of it as well.
Yeah, I'd buy it.
Ben gave the right answer. Buy it twice, everyone. It's good shit.
Alrighty. Well, for those watching on YouTube, I kind of spoiled it already by actually clicking next on the
Oops.
presentation. But our next album is Body Count. Carnivore.
Body count.
This is my pick for the month. I'm looking forward to seeing how everybody enjoys it.
Body Count's in the house.
It's definitely in the house.
Tune in next time on Thunderdome Metal Reviews.